You're 60 and you feel old? You're not alone. But what if I told you that at 60, you might have only lived half your life? No, that's not a fantasy. It's a fact if you start paying attention now. Because what's killing so many seniors in America isn't age, it's neglect. Neglect of the small, invisible choices, the ones that add up silently year after year. And that's exactly what Barron Trump realized. On a quiet afternoon visit to a retirement home in Virginia, he thought he was just showing support, but what he discovered inside those walls changed him. He expected to see loneliness. He expected to hear regrets, but what he didn't expect was how many of those people had once been full of life, until something started slipping through the cracks. One man used to be a professional pilot. Now he couldn't lift his arm. A woman once danced in New York clubs. Now she couldn't remember the names of her children. And as Barron walked down those halls, he kept hearing the same phrase again and again. If only I had known. Not dramatic stories, not horror tales. Just small mistakes, choices that seemed harmless at the time. And that's why you need to stay. Because what Barron uncovered that day could change how you age, and how you avoid ending up where they did. Barron didn't speak much as he walked those halls, but you could see it in his face. Something in him had shifted. This wasn't a photo op. This wasn't politics. This was personal. He stopped by the room of a man named Gerald, 87 years old, former construction worker, sharp eyes, steady hands, but tied to a chair, breathing through effort. Barron sat beside him, and for a moment, neither of them said a word. Then Gerald broke the silence. I waited too long, he said. Barron looked at him. Too long for what? To move, the old man answered. I used to be active. I walked everywhere. Then came the desk job, the couch, the recliner. It didn't happen all at once. But the moment I stopped treating motion like medicine, my body started quitting on me. He tapped his knee, now stiff and swollen. This isn't age, he said. This is rust. Barron didn't have to ask what he meant. Because in that one sentence, Gerald had just revealed the first mistake Barron would hear that day. And if you're listening now, really listening, you already know what he was trying to say. The next room smelled like lavender. Not hospital-grade disinfectant, but something softer, something human. A woman sat by the window, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her name was Ruth. 82. She had once been a teacher, and she still carried herself like she could command a classroom. Barron greeted her gently. You must be Melanian's boy, she said with a smile. You look like someone who still believes people can change. Barron smiled back. They talked for a while, about books, about music, about how the world had changed. But then Ruth grew quiet. You want to know why I'm here? She asked. Why I went from leading minds to needing help to tie my shoes. Barron listened. Because I trusted food labels more than my instincts, she said. Everything said low fat, sugar-free, light. But no one told me that what replaced the fat was poison. Barron leaned in. I didn't think artificial sweeteners could hurt me. I didn't know inflammation could steal your memory. I thought I was doing everything right, until my brain stopped keeping up with my thoughts. Her eyes glistened, but her voice didn't shake. We thought we were smart, but we let the packaging replace common sense. Barron said nothing. Because how do you respond to that kind of quiet regret? If you're watching this and nodding, maybe you felt it too. That something in your body changed when your habits did, and maybe you can still turn it around. Down the hall, Barron met a man sitting perfectly upright in his chair. Back straight, hands folded, eyes sharp. His name was Leonard, a retired Army sergeant. 91 years old, still shaved every morning. Still greeted people with a firm nod. But as Barron sat beside him, he noticed something strange. Leonard's hands were trembling, slightly but constantly. Discipline keeps you alive, Leonard said. That's what I believed my whole life. Barron nodded. But even discipline can blind you. Barron looked at him, puzzled. Leonard took a long breath. I spent decades controlling everything. Calories, steps, medications, routines. I followed every health trend. But I never stopped to ask if it was right for me. He lifted a bottle from the side table. A supplement, one of many in a neat little tray. I kept chasing control. Even when my body was begging me to slow down, I overdid it. I starved myself in the name of clean eating. I ignored fatigue, thinking it was weakness. I pushed through until my nerves stopped responding. He looked Barron straight in the eye. You can be so focused on doing everything right that you forget how to feel what's wrong. Barron sat back. This wasn't recklessness. It was overcorrection. And maybe that's the mistake no one warns you about. The next room was quiet. No TV, no music. Just the slow tick of an old wall clock. Her name was Diane. She didn't look up right away when Barron entered. Just stared out the window at a tree that had lost most of its leaves. Do you want to come in? Barron asked gently. She turned slowly. Her eyes were clear, but tired. You don't have to sit, she said. Most people don't stay long. Barron smiled and sat anyway. They spoke in small waves. About autumn, about time, about the way chairs always seemed to face windows in places like this. Then she said something Barron didn't expect. I was healthy, walked every day. Ate well, took care of myself. But one by one, the people I talked to stopped calling, and I didn't call them either. She looked at him. Loneliness doesn't knock you over. It leaks into your bones. I stopped laughing. I stopped singing. I stopped engaging. Barron felt the weight of her words. By the time I needed help, she said, my heart was weak, not from cholesterol, but from silence. She paused, then added, I thought I didn't need people, but the truth is, we age faster when we're alone. That was her mistake. Not her diet, not her routine, but letting the world grow too quiet. And for many watching now, that might be the one thing you never thought could hurt you, until it already has. Barron sat alone in the common room for a while. The late afternoon light spilled in through the windows, casting long golden lines across the floor. He wasn't checking his phone. He wasn't answering emails. He was just thinking. 3 rooms, 3 stories. 3 small mistakes, each one easy to miss, until it was too late. He thought about Gerald, who stopped moving. About Ruth, who trusted the label instead of her instincts. About Leonard, who controlled everything but forgot how to feel. And Diane, who had simply let life go quiet. Barron leaned back in his chair. These people didn't make huge, reckless decisions, he whispered to himself. They just drifted, slowly. He looked toward a group of residents playing cards near the fireplace. Their laughter was soft, but real. Their movements were slow, but alive. And for the first time that day, Barron felt something unfamiliar press against his chest. Fear. Not of aging, not of death, but of unnoticed habits. Of letting years slip away without realizing you're building the future you'll have to live in later. He thought about his grandfather. He thought about Millennium. And suddenly, this visit felt like more than just a gesture. It felt like a warning. If this is the outcome, he thought, then maybe we've all been asking the wrong questions. Her room was different, plants on the windowsill. Handwritten notes, pinned to a corkboard. A photo of a man in uniform beside a smiling younger woman. Both frozen in a moment that had clearly passed long ago. Her name was Mabel. She was 89. And she greeted Barron like she'd been expecting him. You're the quiet one, she said with a spark in her voice. The one who actually listens. Barron smiled, slightly embarrassed. She patted the chair beside her. I wasn't supposed to be here, she said. That's what they told me. Sighed I had too much energy for a place like this. He looked around. Her room really did feel different. More alive, aware. But then I collapsed, she said flatly. Out of nowhere, in my kitchen. Cutting strawberries. Barron's expression tightened. It wasn't my heart. It wasn't my lungs. It was my sleep. She let the words sit. I spent decades ignoring rest. Thought it was weakness. I bragged about 4 hours a night. Coffee for breakfast. Meetings through lunch. Screen time until midnight. She turned her gaze to Barron. Sleep isn't just recovery, young man. It's repair. You skip it long enough. Your body starts borrowing energy it can't pay back. Her fingers tapped gently on the armrest. I wasn't old when I fell. I was exhausted. Barron nodded slowly. Another mistake, one so common it had become invisible. And in that moment, he realized, some people don't break because they're weak. They break because no one told them to slow down. His name was Harold. He didn't have plants in his room. No decorations. Just a chair by the window and a bookshelf with 3 titles turned spine out. He'd refused to speak to the last 2 visitors that week. But when Barron knocked softly on his door, something changed. You can come in, Harold said, without even turning his head. Barron stepped in slowly. You here to ask what I regret? Harold said, or what broke me? Barron paused. I'm just here to listen, he answered. Harold chuckled, a dry, tired sound. Then sit down, son. I'll give you the truth. But I doubt anyone's ready to hear it. Barron sat quietly. Harold turned to face him, and for a moment, the two just looked at each other. One young, still figuring out the world. The other having lived through most of it. I ignored the little signs, Harold said. That's my story. Nothing dramatic. Just skipped checkups. Ignored heartburn. Brushed off headaches. Dismissed shortness of breath as just getting older. He shook his head slowly. But you know what age really is? It's your body sending softer and softer signals. Until it finally screams. He leaned forward. The tragedy isn't what age does to you. It's how little you prepare for it. That sentence hit Barron like a wave. No scandal, no big twist. Just the consequences of silence. My wife caught her cancer in time, Harold said. I caught mine too late. He looked out the window again. Don't let your audience forget this. Not all pain is loud. And not all warnings come with flashing lights. And Barron stepped outside. The sun was setting, and the sky over the retirement home had turned a deep golden orange. But his thoughts didn't quiet with the light. He leaned against the railing of the porch, looking out at the distant trees. And for the first time that day, he realized he had something he needed to say, not in a speech. Not on a podium, just out loud. They're not here because they gave up, he said to himself. They're here because no one warned them when it mattered. He thought of Gerald's stiff knees, of Ruth's memory loss, of Leonard's trembling hands, Diane's silence, Mabel's exhaustion, and Harold's late diagnosis. Different stories, different lives. But one thing in common, all of them missed the signs. Not because they were careless, but because no one told them what to watch for. Barron took a deep breath. He wasn't a doctor. He wasn't a health expert. But he had something they didn't have anymore. Time. If people knew what I just learned today, he thought, maybe fewer would end up behind these walls. And in that moment, Barron made a decision. He wouldn't let this be just a quiet visit. He'd turn these stories into a message. Because someone out there needed to hear it. Before it was too late. The next morning, Barron didn't go straight home. He sat down in his hotel room, opened his laptop, and stared at the blinking cursor on an empty screen. He could have posted a quote, or a photo, or some polished campaign line. But none of that felt right. So he began to write, just as he had heard it. Not as a lecture, not as advice, just the truth. Yesterday, I met 6 people, he typed. All of them older than 80. All of them smart. All of them strong. And all of them said the same thing in different ways. I didn't know when it started. I just woke up one day, and it had already taken too much. He paused. They didn't die from one big event. They lost themselves through quiet choices, little moments of neglect, misplaced trust, or silence. He hit send. No hashtags, no fanfare. Just the message. And within an hour, the post began to move. Comments poured in. From a woman in Texas who had ignored her blood pressure for years. From a man in Ohio whose father died because he delayed one appointment. From hundreds, thousands, all echoing the same two words. That's me. Barron wasn't trying to go viral. But sometimes, truth travels faster than marketing ever could. And that day, his voice wasn't political. It wasn't strategic. It was human. 2 days later, Barron's phone wouldn't stop vibrating. He wasn't used to this kind of attention. Not for something so quiet, so simple. No outrage, no scandal. Just a story about forgotten people and the mistakes that brought them there. But something had shifted. News outlets picked it up. Not because it was sensational, but because it was real. Barron Trump shares emotional experience after visiting retirement home. Heartbreaking mistakes seniors regret. Trump family member speaks out. Thousands respond to Barron's message. That's me. But the attention wasn't what moved him. Were the private messages. A woman in Florida sent a photo of her father walking again after 3 years of barely moving. We stopped treating his aches like normal aging and started treating them like messages, she wrote. An older man in Arizona said he booked his first full checkup in over a decade. I figured, better late than never, he said. Your words lit a fire under me. A nurse in Kansas wrote about an elderly patient who started eating again. After hearing part of Barron's post read aloud during visiting hours, he said, maybe I still have a chance to bounce back. That was the first full meal he ate in 2 weeks. Barron sat in silence as he read. And then, he received a letter. Not digital, not a tweet, a real letter. From Harold, the quiet man by the window. His handwriting was shaky, but clear. I never thought anyone would listen to a man like me, it said. But you did. And now, others are listening too. I don't know if that buys me more time, but maybe it gives someone else theirs. Barron folded the paper carefully, placed it in his jacket, and for the first time in days, he smiled. Because maybe, just maybe, this wasn't just a story. It was a lifeline. Barron had always been quiet, not shy, just reserved. He'd grown up in a world of headlines, where silence was often safer than honesty. But this felt different. The retirement home wasn't trending anymore. The comments were slowing down. The world, as it always does, was moving on. But Barron wasn't. He kept thinking about Diane, who grew old in silence. About Leonard, whose discipline became a cage. About Mabel, who collapsed not from illness but exhaustion. And Harold, who waited until the end of his story before anyone really listened. And Barron began to wonder, how many more were out there? People living behind walls of politeness, brushing off symptoms, calling their pain just part of aging, when in truth, they were slipping away one choice at a time. That night, he sat at the dinner table with his mother. Melania had always been protective, strong, but watchful. She poured him tea and studied his face. You look older, she said with a half smile. Maybe I just saw too much, he replied. Melania leaned in, serious now. Was it that bad? He shook his head. No, it was worse, because it wasn't tragedy. It was slow surrender. All of them just gave up their health one compromise at a time, and no one stopped them. No one told them soon enough. Melania went quiet. Then she reached across the table, placed her hand over his. Then maybe you just did. They sat in silence for a long moment. And in that stillness, Barron realized something. Sometimes the biggest change doesn't come from shouting. It comes from listening, and having the courage to repeat what others were too afraid to say. 1 week later, Barron sat in the back of a small community hall in Pennsylvania. He hadn't come to speak. He hadn't announced his visit. He just wanted to observe. A local health organization had launched a new senior awareness event. Nothing fancy. Just folding chairs, handouts, and a few nurses giving free blood pressure checks. But at the front table, something caught his eye. A single sheet of paper, laminated and taped to the wall. It read, "Listen to the quiet signs." Inspired by Barron Trump's visit to St. Mary's home, Barron looked around. Dozens of older men and women, laughing, talking, asking questions. Some nervous, some relieved, all of them present. One man stood with his daughter, showing her a new medication schedule. A woman proudly announced that she'd started walking 10 minutes every morning since reading Barron's post. No press. No applause. Just real people making small shifts. The kind that add years, or at least dignity. Outside, Barron checked his phone. A new message from Harold's daughter. "My father passed away last night," it read. But he was smiling when he went. He said, "Someone finally heard me. Thank you." Barron didn't respond right away. He just stood still. Let the moment breathe. Then he whispered, more to himself than anyone else, "This is how we fix it. One quiet voice at a time." 2 weeks later, Barron returned to the retirement home. No press, no photos. Just him, a coat slung over his shoulder, and a heart full of memories. The same halls. The same faint scent of lavender and coffee. But somehow, it all felt different. He passed Gerald's room. Empty. Ruth's door was closed. A nurse stood outside and simply shook her head. Leonard was gone too. Barron paused in the hallway. There was no dramatic music. No voice in his ear saying what to feel. Just absence. The quiet kind that follows when people leave quietly, as they lived. Then, from the far end of the hall, a sound, light humming. A familiar rhythm. He followed it to Mabel's room. She sat by the window, sunlight warming her face. A scarf around her shoulders and a soft smile in her eyes. "I didn't think you'd come back," she said gently. "I didn't think I could stay away," Barron answered. She reached for his hand. "You changed more here than you know." He nodded ... But she continued. "Not just the people in these rooms, the ones out there too. They're talking, they're watching. They're remembering what it means to fight for life. Not just to survive, but to live with intention." Barron sat with her in silence. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, and the sunlight kept pouring in. And for the first time in weeks, Barron didn't feel heavy. He felt ready. Ready to carry something. Not a cause, not a campaign, but a truth. One that began in a place no one wanted to end up in. And might just be the reason someone out there avoids it. Weeks had passed. Barron was back home. No headlines. No speeches. Just the echo of stories he couldn't forget. He walked through the quiet halls of his family's home. And something inside him had shifted permanently. He wasn't thinking about politics. Not the next move. Not public perception. He was thinking about the people he met. People whose names would never trend, but whose lessons were worth more than most books he'd ever read. One morning he sat down again, not to write a post, not to plan anything, just to speak. And today, that message is for you. If you're watching this, and you're over 60, don't let anyone tell you your best years are behind you. You're not done. You're not broken. And if you've made mistakes, good, that means you've lived. He looked straight into the camera. But now it's time to live differently, to pay attention, to treat your health like your future depends on it, because it does. He paused, then added, "I saw what happens when people wait too long. And I don't want that to be you." And with that, he stood up. No music. No applause. Just a quiet truth left hanging in the air. And a choice waiting to be made by the one person who matters now. YOU. If this story touched you, then maybe it wasn't just a story. Maybe it was a mirror, a warning, or a quiet reminder that you still have time, time to move, time to change, time to live with purpose. So before you go, ask yourself, what small habit could you shift today to avoid waking up in a place you never wanted to be? And if this message meant something to you, share it. Someone you love might need it more than you know. Subscribe to stay with us, because the next story might just save another life, maybe even yours.